The Senate passed a temporary funding measure that will end the government shutdown if approved by the House and signed by the president. Joining us to discuss is Mike Leon, host of the Can We Please Talk podcast, and we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So, as always, good to see you guys on this Tuesday afternoon, and happy Veterans Day. So, Tony, I want to go to you first. Your first thoughts when you heard Democrats joined Republicans to vote for this bill?
I mean, it was expected. Unfortunately, there were obviously going to be individuals, especially inside of the purple state, and also with Tim Kaine and his large amount of federal workers as his constituents in Virginia. This was always going to happen. We understood they were going to flake. They tried to run a really tough line and say, oh, we're doing this to extend Obamacare subsidies. And then when they were asked why Obamacare subsidies needed to be extended, if the program was so great, when you and I and everyone in the country was told it was going to be wonderful, well, why did these subsidies need to be extended? Why did Biden's COVID subsidies need to continue on ad nauseum? They had no answer. And as the country continued to look at the failure of the shutdown, eventually people like Cortez Masto were able to rally a couple other purple senators and kind of the more moderate establishment to her side, and they broke the back. Unfortunately, it had to take this long.
Okay, so Mike, let me go to you. What's your perspective?
Yeah, good to see you guys this afternoon. It's a little similar. I think the biggest thing was, last week when we were on here, Tony said maybe the consequences of the election and what would happen would play a factor. Well, it did, but not in the way that you think. None of these senators are on the ballot in 26, right? And Angus King, who's, sometimes caucuses with Democrats, is an independent. So when you look at it just from that perspective, when you look at there's no consequences that any of these senators will face in 2026, given the consequences of what happened in 2025 with this, election on the off year, I think it kind of sent the message of these were the right Democrats that could actually do this because they wouldn't face the potential blowback at the ballot box. And like we've talked about, look, I traveled this week to New York and back for my brother's wedding. I dealt with flight delays, taxiing delays as well, getting to the gates. You've seen the videos. NTD has posted it on their social media about pilots, getting on the loudspeaker and saying, hey, we're going to be about maybe 3-4 hours delayed here. So there's a huge impact. But not only that, there's a safety. And as we said before, Don, as you said before we came on, there are people that are going to be missing a second and maybe tertiary paycheck coming up here, depending upon how the vote goes on Wednesday. So it's good to see it finally potentially dwindle down. But like Tony said, maybe this could have been avoided earlier. But to my overarching point, we're going to be back here in January talking about a looming government shutdown and how we figured this all out.
Okay, so Tony, like Mike said, those senators that voted for the bill are not on the ballot for 2026. What do you think persuaded these Democrats to vote for the bill?
Well, two things. Number one, according to some of the reporting from Axios, members of the House in their own state, because yes, there are some House Democrats that are on the ballot in those states. Again, all of the House. So when you look at 2026 in the House is already being tenuous for Democrats as it is, the idea that there might be some individuals, not, Seth Moulton, for example, who's trying to undercut senior Democrats in Massachusetts. But when you look at other House members across the country, there are those that don't believe that the current strategy right now of playing hardball ad nauseum is really effective. They see it's not what Americans want. We saw that in Pennsylvania. We've seen that in Georgia, although Ossoff and Warnock haven't necessarily played to that tune yet. I think realistically, though, what got a lot of these people to finally end up kind of calling it quits on this particular shutdown is that they were never going to get what it was that they wanted, because what it was that they were asking for was completely ridiculous. And there was no argument to make for another year, as again, air travel in this country has been completely crippled. There's no reason it should be like this. And now, of course, the upgrades that were already set in place to pick up after the mess that Pete Buttigieg should have solved and then wasted money and time to ignore. Those are things that now have to be factored into this series of delay reconciliation. And so if you're Dick Durbin, yeah, you do eventually have to figure it out, because O'Hare has to function one way or the other.
So, Mike, do you agree with that one point that Tony said, that the Democrats were never going to get what they were asking for, and that's why they voted for this package?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Short answer, yes. I do. I agree with what he's saying in terms of they were never going to get exactly what they wanted. They were trying to hold the line, and there was one potential line in the sand, and this was kind of the one that they could potentially make. So I will agree with that. Let me just push back on something Tony said there, because under Pete Buttigieg with the DOT, one of the big things that Buttigieg did was focus on holding the airlines accountable. Right. So flight delays that impact consumers, making sure you're refunded and notified by the airlines. He focused more on that, whereas you see Secretary Duffy's focusing more on the archaic system and how, air traffic control handles this. So those are two different ways of the way they're going about it. And I think, yes, there were some failures under Pete. Maybe there's been some failures under Duffy, but again, a lot of it has dealt with the government being impacted. Doge cuts first initially, and now you have a government shutdown. None of that's going to help him and his department. I think if you injected him with truth serum, he would definitely tell you that. But in terms of the Democrats here, real quick on this, again, I'll say this again. The Republicans are in charge of the government. There was a mandate in the election that every Republican strategist and their mother told me on every news outlet I've ever been on over these last 10 months that the country wanted Republicans in charge. So because the country wanted Republicans in charge, they now have to figure out how to govern. What does that mean? That means that these ACA subsidies that were being fought for by the Democrats, now Donald Trump is in this inalienable position where, position where now he actually has to come up with a healthcare plan to replace this. He ran on it in 2016. We haven't seen a healthcare plan that has come to fruition from Republicans. So that will be the interesting thing in all of this, because like Tony said, they didn't get the concessions that they wanted. But now I'm seeing Republicans start to flip their message to like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, we could all roll our eyes on the 180 she's done, but now everyone's starting to talk about, well, what's the new healthcare plan going to look like? If we didn't make the concessions on this, what is your plan, especially that you can take out on the road with you in 2026 from the Republican perspective? So that is what is going to be the next wave that we're going to be talking about over these next couple of months. If we don't get another CR passed or actually a funding bill throughout the whole fiscal of 26, is going to be about the healthcare plan that Republicans are potentially going to put forward.
So, Tony, can you talk a little bit about the Affordable Care Act? Leader John Thune promised the Senate will vote on it. The subsidies in December. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I think there's going to be a series of rules that are put forward that are essentially trying to keep fungible amounts of different states from going to those who aren't supposed to be receiving federal assistance. We've seen this, of course, on the data in California, Minnesota, et cetera. But of course, I don't believe we're going to see those subsidies passed in December, because the Obamacare, the Affordability Care Act, it's a complete failure. And that's not me saying that. That's Senator Peter Welch of Vermont saying that, Democrat on the Senate floor. It's a failure. We were told it was going to be the savior of the American healthcare system. It was a complete abysmal failure. We threw more money at it. Then we threw more money at it. Then we threw extra subsidies on top of the more money we threw at it. It's a failure. So, I mean, before we get into the conversation of, well, what's the magical plan? The system that we had before was far better than this. And we came in and we, like a bull in a china shop, we knocked everything over, as the left often does. And now there's nothing to actually put back together. And so I'm going to kind of push back just a little bit, Mike, on well, where's the plan? Again, I don't recall asking anyone to come in and tear apart the system that we had, which was not perfect and had its own issues. But now that the Democrat system of throwing infinite amounts of money at the healthcare system that fails and insurance premiums are skyrocketing, and the idea that the last administration went after kind of consumer choice instead of fixing the systemic issues at play, just throwing another coat of paint on it and throwing more money and hoping the building stays up isn't working. And so this administration is going through and is picking apart some of that mess. There are a couple of proposals that I've heard. I hope that a privatized healthcare system is the way that we move to, which opens up and deregulates and allows individuals to try different things. We're seeing this right now in, as we've talked about, in the ocular field. We've seen this in the cardiovascular fields now with some of the stuff coming out of Florida. And then, of course, we've seen this regarding weight loss drugs, not to mention anti-allergy medication, things like that. The injections for when you're having an allergic reaction. I don't know why that's not coming to my mind at the moment. Those are areas the market is starting to compete because they've been deregulated. That needs to happen across the board.
All right, Mike, any points from Tony that you'd like to respond to?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it's a fresh coat of paint. I think the ACA was well intentioned. And again, as somebody right now who's a private contractor who has to rely on the ACA to, get insurance for my family, there's issues with it. Not only what you're paying monthly is obviously way cheaper than what you would pay if you had a W 2 contract job and you lost your job and you had COBRA benefits. It's way cheaper than that, but the coverage is not the same, right? And obviously, everybody has killed Obama already on the, you could keep your doctor and keep the insurance or whatever the slogan was. I'm forgetting it at this moment. You all know what it is, and that none of that came true, obviously, because of the options that the ACA offers. But I do want to push back, Tony. I love pushing back, buddy. The biggest thing that I would say is that it's really up to Republicans to fix this. I don't need more diagnosis of the issue. We've been talking about the issue. We know what the problems are with the ACA. And there's countless stories of people that are, red, white, and blue, no political leaning or no affiliation, that are going through issues with ACA. They want to solve to it. So this is twice now, 45 and 47, that Donald Trump has been president, and we actually haven't seen a plan. And the best instance I can give last night, I was watching a different network. I'm not going to say them here. And there was a Republican strategist that was on there that was talking about, and he got asked point blank, well, what is the plan? And the plan was similar to what Tony said, diagnosing the issue. I don't need more diagnosis of the issue. I want to use a doctor analogy. I know where the pain is. The pain is rotating right here. I need you to fix the pain, even if it's a temporary alleviation of the pain, but I need you to fix it short term and long term. And that's the issue that we're having right now. And I think in 25, especially at the ballot box, we saw, and again, people can digest it either way with respect to the numbers and voter turnout, but we saw a little bit of the pushback of what Trump has done on affordability. Now, I think in 26, the message that Democrats will take with them is about where's that healthcare plan? Because this is what we were fighting for. Republicans got the government back open, right? We played ball. We came across the aisle with them. And now, where's that healthcare plan? When are we going to fix this? Let's hope to hold them accountable to it.
Okay, Tony, one more response on ACA, and I do want to move the conversation along a bit. Your reaction to calls now for a change in leadership in the Senate, some saying that Schumer couldn't keep his caucus unified.
I mean, of course, he couldn't keep his caucus unified. There have been separate reports from different news agencies suggesting that he gave the wink and the nod. He didn't give the wink and the nod. Schumer's leadership is over. The Democrat Party is now going on young progressives and old suburban women. That seems to be the new two key demographics moving into 26. Big mistake. But alas, I certainly won't get in their way on that one. But regarding the healthcare situation, a full diagnosis is necessary. And the reason I say that is Mamdani. When you look at a diagnosis, it actually matters to determine what the root causes are in order to determine a solution. The left and the right think there are very different causes to this particular ailment on the American healthcare system. So whereas someone like Mamdani has said, oh, it's the evil rich white corporations that are hurting everyone because they're mean and they're, bent over backwards, and insert stereotypes that we were supposed to throw away after the 1930s. No, that's absolutely ridiculous. And we did try the last diagnosis and solution. So if there's a period now, a month, 2 months, where Republicans openly debate, because our caucus doesn't usually go behind doors and unilaterally align. We argue things out in the open, messy and often discordant, then we're going to find a solution that is hopefully better. I can't promise that it'll be better, because whether it's Mike Lawler from New York who wins out, or it's someone more like Thomas Massey, or it's Byron Donalds, or it's the young man out from California that also has a new proposition that's far more moderate than Byron Donalds in that example. I don't know what the solution to that can be. What I want to see is it advocated and argued out in the open until we come with the most deregulated system. That's kind of my answer to that pushback, Mike.
Okay, Mike, I think we do have to wrap up a bit. Any final thoughts you have? Maybe you can respond to calls for a change in leadership in the Senate.
Yeah, well, I mean, the best relationship I have is with Congressman Seth Moulton. Yeah, I've had him on the show a bunch, and he's one of the members of Congress I've been communicating with prior to coming on here to just talk about his vote potentially on Wednesday. And, I do agree with him just in terms of, I know Aaliyah had a famous song, "Age is nothing but a number," but Chuck Schumer is getting up there in age. He wasn't able to keep his caucus together on this. The one thing I've always credited Republicans on my show about is that they stay unified. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is an exception to to the rule right now in terms of what she's doing and going on every other network and talking about what Republicans have done wrong. And maybe Thomas Massie, obviously. But I think that unified front, the ability to have a unified message that trickles not only from the chambers of the Senate, but also to the House as well. I think Schumer and Jeffries are leave a little bit left to be desired. And I know not only Seth Moulton has that opinion, who's more of a moderate Democrat, who I think will appeal more on a broader stage because he's an Iraq veteran, because he's somebody that, ran in a purple district and flipped that years ago back in 2014. But I also think that there needs to be more Democrats like a Seth Moulton that, to Tony's point, should hopefully, take over a little bit more of the party and rein the party a little bit more back in from the fringes of the far left.
Well, all right, Tony and Mike, good conversation. As always, thank you very much. Talk to you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tom.